The night I heard my husband's voice on that FBI recording, I knew the famiglia would not let him live. I was sitting in a federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, winter light bleeding through frosted windows, listening to Special Agent Cordero play tape after tape of conversations they'd pulled from the phones at Vesuvio's restaurant. My hands were folded in my lap like I was praying, but I wasn't praying. I was counting. Counting how many times Vincent said things he shouldn't have said. Counting how many seconds until someone else heard these tapes. Counting the days my husband had left to breathe. They wanted me to testify. They wanted me to tell them about the money, the meetings. The men who came to our house at 3 in the morning smelling like cigars and fear. They wanted me to betray the only world I'd ever known, and in return, they'd give me a new name, a new life, a witness protection fairy tale that would last until someone put a bullet in my head at a grocery store in Kansas. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it started, because nothing in this life happens suddenly. The mafia doesn't explode into your world. It seeps in slowly, like water through a cracked foundation, until one day you wake up and realize you're drowning. My name is Angela Terranova, and I was born into this thing of ours without ever asking to be. I met Vincent Terranova on a Tuesday in September 1985, outside Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church in the Bronx. I was 22 years old, wearing a black dress for my uncle's funeral, and Vincent was standing by the steps smoking a cigarette in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my father made in 3 months. He had dark eyes that looked right through you, the kind of eyes that had seen things and decided not to look away. "You're Sal's niece," he said. It wasn't a question. I am. Your uncle was a good man. He kept his mouth shut when a lot of guys would have talked. I didn't know what that meant then. I just knew that Vincent Terranova carried himself like someone important. Like gravity bent differently around him. When he walked into the church, men twice his age stepped aside. When he sat down, people whispered. And when he looked at me during the service, I felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. 3 months later, we were engaged. My mother cried when I told her. Not happy tears. She grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks and said, "Angela, you marry that man, you marry everything he is. You understand me?" Everything. I didn't understand. Not then. Vincent's family lived in a 3-story house in Throg's Neck with a garden my future mother-in-law tended like it was holy ground. His father, Dominic Terranova, was a capo in the Lucchese crime family. One of the 5 families that ran New York like a corporation built on blood and silence. Dominic had done 2 stretches in Sing Sing, once for racketeering, once for assault, and he walked with a limp from a disagreement that ended with someone putting an ice pick through his kneecap in 1971. At family dinners, the men ate first. The women served, poured wine, cleared plates, and spoke only when spoken to. I learned quickly that there were things you didn't ask about. When Vincent came home at 4 in the morning, you didn't ask where he'd been. When strange men with Brooklyn accents called the house and hung up without leaving messages, you didn't ask who they were. When Vincent handed you $12,000 in cash and told you to put it somewhere safe, you didn't ask where it came from. You just nodded and smiled and kept the secrets that would someday kill you both. We got married in the spring of 1986, a wedding with 300 guests and an open bar that ran through cases of champagne like water. I wore a dress with a 10-foot train and a veil imported from Milan. Vincent wore a tuxedo and a gold Rolex that caught the light every time he raised his glass. His best man was Tommy Marchetti, a soldier in the family with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass and a reputation for making problems disappear. Tommy got up during the reception and gave a toast that made everyone laugh except Vincent's father. To Vincent and Angela, Tommy said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. May you have a long and happy marriage, and may Vincent remember that in this life, we got only 2 things we can't afford to lose. Our honor and our silence. Everyone clapped. Vincent kissed me. I tasted champagne and lies. That first year was a blur of luxury I'd never known. Vincent bought me a Mercedes, a full-length mink coat, jewelry that felt heavy with the weight of other people's suffering. We lived in a condo in City Island with a view of the water. and every week Vincent would bring home cash in paper bags and count it at the kitchen table while I made dinner. Where does it come from? I asked him once. He looked up from the stacks of 20s and 50s. His eyes patient. Business. What kind of business? The kind that keeps you in that coat and those shoes. The kind that makes sure nobody ever disrespects you. You want to know more than that? I didn't answer. Then don't ask questions you don't want answers to, Angela. I learned to stop asking, but I wasn't blind. I saw the way men like Vincent operated. I saw the system they'd built, invisible to people who didn't know where to look, but obvious once you understood the language. The Mafia in New York in the mid-80s was an empire. They controlled the unions, the construction sites, the garbage collection, the trucking routes, the fish markets, the garment district. They ran bookmaking operations out of social clubs in Little Italy and loan-sharking businesses that turned corner stores into cash machines. They laundered money through restaurants and real estate. They bribed judges and cops. They intimidated witnesses and burned down buildings for insurance payouts. And they did it all with a code that was older than America itself. A code called Omerta. Silence above all. Loyalty above family. The family above everything. Vincent explained it to me one night when we were lying in bed, the city lights throwing shadows across the ceiling. You know why this thing works, he said. Why we've been around 100 years and we ain't going nowhere. Why? Because we understand something the government don't. We understand that men need to belong to something bigger than themselves. They need respect. They need to feel like they matter. You give a man that, and he'll die for you. He'll go to prison for you. He'll kill for you. That's what the famiglia is. It's not a gang. It's a brotherhood. Blood in, blood out. And what about the people who get hurt? I asked quietly. Vincent was quiet for a long time. Then he said, everybody gets hurt eventually, Angela. That's just life. The only question is whether you're the one holding the knife or the one bleeding. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that there was another way. That people didn't have to live like this, that love didn't have to be built on fear and violence, but I didn't. Because I was already too deep. By 1988, Vincent had moved up. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was an acting capo, running a crew of 15 men who reported to him, who brought him envelopes of cash every week, who did what he said without question. Our condo became a meeting place. Men would come by at odd hours, sit in our living room, drink espresso, talk in low voices about things I wasn't supposed to hear, but I heard anyway. I heard them talk about a restaurant owner in Queens who was late on a payment. I heard them talk about a union boss who needed to be reminded who was in charge. I heard them talk about a building in the South Bronx that was going to have an unfortunate electrical fire, and I heard Vincent give orders in a voice that didn't sound like the man who held me at night. You tell him he's got 48 hours, Vincent said to one of his guys, a kid named Polly with nervous hands. 48 hours, or we send someone to visit his daughter's school. He'll understand. Polly nodded and left. I was in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I washed dishes that were already clean. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that restaurant owner, about his daughter, about the invisible machinery of terror that kept this whole system running. I thought about leaving. I thought about packing a bag and disappearing, going to my mother, going to the police, going anywhere that wasn't here. But where could I go that Vincent wouldn't find me? And even if I ran, what would I tell them? That my husband was in the mafia? They'd laugh. They'd say I knew what I was getting into when I married him. They'd say I was complicit, and they'd be right, because by then, I was complicit. I wore the jewelry. I drove the car. I lived in the condo paid for with money squeezed from people who had no choice but to pay. I'd made my choice the day I said I do, and now I was trapped inside it like a fly in amber. The FBI came into our lives in the fall of 1989. I was at the salon getting my hair done when two men in cheap suits walked in and asked to speak to me. They flashed badges and led me outside to a gray sedan parked on the street. Mrs. Terranova, the older one said, "My name is Special Agent Michael Cordero. This is Agent Davis." We'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband." My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "We think you do. We know Vincent is involved with the Lucchese family. We know he's running extortion operations in Queens and the Bronx. We know he's laundering money through at least 3 restaurants and a construction company. And we know you're smart enough to see what's happening." "I want to call my lawyer." Cordero smiled. "You can do that. But we're not arresting you, Mrs. Terranova. We're giving you a chance. A chance to walk away from this before it all comes down. Because it is coming down. We've got surveillance. We've got wiretaps. We've got informants. And when we move, everyone goes down. Your husband, his father, everyone in that crew. You want to go down with them." "I don't know anything." "Then you're either lying or you're not paying attention. Either way, you're in danger. Men like Vincent, they don't let loose ends survive. You think you're special because you're his wife? You think that protects you?" I didn't answer. "Think about it," Cordero said. "When you're ready to talk, call this number." He handed me a business card. I took it, and they drove away. I stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes, holding that card like it was made of uranium. Then I went into the nearest trash can and threw it away, but I couldn't throw away what he'd said. It crawled into my brain and nested there, whispering at night when Vincent was out, when I was alone in our expensive condo with nothing but my thoughts and my fear. Were they watching us? Were our phones tapped? Was someone in Vincent's crew already talking? I started noticing things I'd overlooked before. The way Vincent would sometimes take calls in the car instead of the house. The way he'd started meeting people in parks and parking lots instead of restaurants. The way he looked over his shoulder more often, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning crowds. Something had changed. The air felt different. Thinner. One night in December, Vincent came home with blood on his shirt. Not a lot. Just a few drops on the cuff, barely visible unless you were looking for it. But I was looking. I was always looking now. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing. Spilled some wine at dinner." "That's not wine." He stopped. Turned. Looked at me with eyes that had gone flat and cold. "Angela. Drop it, Vincent. I need to know." I said drop it. His voice was a wall I couldn't climb. I dropped it, but later, when he was in the shower, I checked his jacket. Found his pager. Scrolled through the messages. Most were just numbers, codes I didn't understand. But one was different. T talked. "Clean up tonight. VR." I put the pager back. Sat on the bed. Felt my whole world tilting sideways. T talked. Someone had talked. Someone had broken omerta, and cleanup meant exactly what it sounded like. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Vincent, listening to him breathe, wondering whose blood had been on his shirt, wondering if he'd pulled the trigger himself or just watched. The next morning, I saw on the news that a man named Thomas Greco had been found shot to death in a parking garage in Yonkers. No suspects. No witnesses. Just another unsolved murder in a city full of them. I knew. I knew it was connected. I knew Vincent had been there, and I knew I was married to a killer. The surveillance got heavier after that. I could feel it, even if I couldn't see it. Black cars that followed too closely. Phone calls where no one spoke on the other end. Men in suits sitting in cafes across from places I went. Vincent knew too. He started changing his routine, never going to the same place twice, never talking business on the phone, meeting his crew in the back rooms of bakeries and social clubs where the FBI couldn't plant bugs, but they didn't need to plant bugs everywhere. Because they'd already planted them in the one place that mattered, Vesuvio's restaurant. It was a place in Little Italy that Vincent and his crew used for meetings, a family-owned spot with red checkered tablecloths and pictures of Frank Sinatra on the walls. The owner, Carlo Vesuvio, had been connected to the Lucchese family for 30 years. He was solid. Trusted, or so Vincent thought. What Vincent didn't know was that Carlo's son, Marco, had been arrested for drug trafficking in 1988 and was facing 20 years in federal prison. The FBI had flipped him. Made him a deal. Cooperate, and he could walk. Marco had let them into the restaurant. Let them wire the back room. Let them record every conversation, every word, every incriminating statement that Vincent and his crew made over espresso and cannoli. For 8 months, the FBI recorded everything. I didn't know any of this. Not until Agent Cordero called me in January of 1991 and told me I needed to come to the federal courthouse immediately. Why? I asked. Because we're about to arrest your husband, Mrs. Terranova. And if you want any chance of not going down with him, you need to talk to us. Now, I went. I didn't tell Vincent. I just got in my car and drove to Manhattan, my hands shaking on the wheel, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios, none of them good. Cordero met me in a small conference room with gray walls and no windows. He had a tape recorder on the table. A stack of transcripts. And a look on his face that said he'd already won. We're moving tomorrow, he said. RICO charges. Racketeering, extortion, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. We've got your husband on tape ordering hits. We've got him discussing payments from union locals. We've got him planning arsons. We've got everything, Mrs. Terranova. He's going to die in prison. I couldn't breathe. I want a lawyer. You can have a lawyer. But listen to me first. You don't have to go down with him. You cooperate, you testify about what you know, and we can protect you. Witness protection. New identity. New life. You walk away, and if I don't, then we charge you as a co-conspirator. You handled cash. You accepted gifts purchased with illegal proceeds. You knew about criminal activity and didn't report it. You're not innocent here, Angela. You're just not as guilty as he is. He pressed play on the tape recorder. I heard Vincent's voice, crystal clear, talking to Tommy Marchetti about a construction site in Brooklyn where they were running a bid rigging scheme. We make sure our guys get the contract, Vincent said on the tape. Anyone else tries to bid, we pay them a visit. Make it clear that this is our project. They back off, or they have problems. Real problems. What kind of problems? Tommy asked. The kind that require a hospital. Or a funeral. Laughter on the tape, silence in the conference room. Cordero stopped the recording. That's one of 63 tapes we have. You want to hear more? I shook my head. I felt like I was falling, like the floor had opened up and I was dropping into a void with no bottom. He's my husband, I whispered. He's a criminal. And if you don't help us, you're going to prison too. Is that what you want? To spend the next 20 years in a federal facility because you were loyal to a man who would throw you under the bus in a second if it meant saving himself? I looked up at Cordero. Vincent would never, wouldn't he? You think you're special? You think the Mafia has rules about protecting wives? Let me tell you what happens when we arrest him tomorrow. He'll be offered a deal. Cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. And if he thinks giving us information about you will help him, he'll do it. He'll tell us you knew everything. He'll say you helped him launder money. He'll say you were part of the conspiracy. And then you're both in prison, except he gets out in 15 years and you get out in 20, you're lying. I'm not. And you know I'm not. You've seen how this works. You've seen what these men do to survive. I sat there, staring at the table, at the tape recorder, at the transcripts of conversations I'd tried so hard not to hear. Cordero leaned forward. I need an answer, Angela. Are you going to help us, or are you going to go down with him? I thought about Vincent. About the way he held me at night. About the promises he'd made. About the life we'd built together on a foundation of blood and lies, and I thought about the restaurant owner's daughter. About Thomas Greco in that parking garage. About all the people who'd been hurt so that Vincent could live like a king. I need time, I said. You don't have time. We move tomorrow at 6 a.m. You have until midnight tonight to decide. After that, the offer's off the table. I left the courthouse in a daze. Drove home on autopilot. Vincent wasn't there. He was out somewhere, doing whatever it was he did when he wasn't home. I walked through our condo, looking at everything we'd accumulated. The furniture. The art. The closets full of clothes and shoes. The jewelry in velvet boxes. All of it paid for with money extorted from people who had no choice. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony, watching the lights of the city flicker in the darkness. What was I supposed to do? Betray my husband and enter witness protection, living the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Or stay silent and go to prison, losing everything anyway? There was no good choice. There was only survival. At 11:30 that night, Vincent came home. He looked tired. Stressed. He loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." "Long day." He sat next to me on the couch. Put his hand on my knee. "You seem off." "I'm fine." He studied my face. "Angela. What's going on?" I should have lied. I should have said nothing. I should have smiled and kissed him and kept the secret buried, but I couldn't. The weight of it was crushing me. "The FBI came to see me today," I said quietly. Vincent's face went pale. Then red. Then something else. Something dangerous. "What did they say?" "They said they're arresting you tomorrow. They said they have tapes. They said I could cooperate or go to prison too." "And what did you tell them?" "Nothing. I didn't tell them anything." "But you're thinking about it, Vincent." He stood up. Paced across the room. Ran his hands through his hair. "Jesus Christ, Angela. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand that the second you walked into that courthouse, you put a target on your back? If anyone finds out you talked to the feds," "I didn't talk to them. I didn't say anything." "It doesn't matter. Just meeting with them is enough." "You think my father's going to believe you kept your mouth shut? You think the family's going to trust you now? Then what was I supposed to do?" "They threatened me, Vincent. They said if I don't cooperate, they're going to charge me too. So you come home and tell me? You think that helps? You think I can fix this?" I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know what's real. Are the tapes real? Did you really order people killed? Did you really?" He grabbed my shoulders. Not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to make me stop talking. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and intense. "Everything I did for us. For this life. You think we got all this by accident? You think I made this money working some 9-to-5 job? This is the life, Angela. This is what it costs." "I didn't ask for this." "Yes, you did. You asked for it the day you married me. You knew who I was. You knew what I did. You just didn't want to look at it too close." He was right. I had known. Maybe not the details, maybe not the specifics, but I'd known enough. "What are we going to do?" I whispered. Vincent let go of me. Sat down. Looked defeated for the first time since I'd known him. "I don't know," he said. "If they're moving tomorrow, it's already over. The indictments are sealed. The warrants are signed. There's nowhere to run. Then we have to what? Cooperate? Become rats? You know what happens to rats, Angela. You've seen it." I had. I'd heard the stories. Informants who disappeared. Families who got killed. Witnesses who made it to trial and then got gunned down on courthouse steps. "We could leave," I said. "Leave the city. Leave the country. Just disappear." "With what money? They'll freeze our accounts the second they arrest me. And where are we going to go that the family won't find us? You think there's anywhere in the world we'd be safe?" He was right. We were trapped. We sat in silence for a long time. Then Vincent said, "You need to decide, Angela. You need to figure out what you're going to do when they come. Because they will come. For both of us, what are you going to do?" "What I've always done. Keep my mouth shut. Honor the oath I took. Go to prison if I have to. But I won't rat. I won't break omerta. That's the one thing I can control, even if it means spending the rest of your life in prison. Even then, I looked at my husband, this man I'd loved, this man I'd built a life with, and I realized I didn't know him at all. Or maybe I'd always known him, and I'd just been lying to myself about who he really was. I can't go to prison, Vincent, I said. I won't survive it. He looked at me with something like pity. Then you know what you have to do. The FBI came at 6:15 the next morning. I woke up to the sound of boots on stairs, voices shouting, doors being kicked in. Vincent was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed. Fully dressed. Don't say anything, he told me. Not a word. Ask for a lawyer and keep your mouth shut. Then the door burst open and agents in FBI windbreakers flooded into our bedroom, guns drawn, shouting commands. Vincent Terranova, you're under arrest. Hands where we can see them. Vincent stood slowly, raised his hands, let them cuff him without resisting. Angela Terranova, you're also under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. I didn't hear the rest. I was crying, shaking, feeling handcuffs close around my wrists as they led me out of the condo in my pajamas, cameras flashing from news crews already gathered outside. They took us to separate facilities. Vincent went to the Metropolitan Correctional Center. I went to a federal holding facility in Brooklyn. I spent 3 days in a cell before Cordero came to see me again. Changed your mind yet? He asked. I had. I'd changed my mind 1,000 times. I'd thought about Vincent's face when they arrested him. I'd thought about his father, Dominic, who would know by now that I'd met with the FBI. I'd thought about Tommy Marchetti and the rest of the crew, who would assume I'd talked. I thought about the fact that I was already dead. The only question was whether I'd die in prison or die in witness protection. If I cooperate, I said, what happens to Vincent? He goes to prison for a long time. 20 years, minimum, and if I don't, you both go to prison. Same amount of time. Maybe more, so either way, he's gone. Either way, he's gone. The only question is whether you go with him. I closed my eyes. Thought about the life I'd had, the life I'd wanted, the life I'd lost the moment I said I do to a man who valued honor over love. I'll testify, I said. I'll tell you everything. Cordero nodded. Smart choice, but it didn't feel smart. It felt like drowning. The trial started in September of 1991. RICO charges against Vincent Terranova, Dominic Terranova, Tommy Marchetti, and 17 other members of the Lucchese crime family. I sat in a witness room for 3 weeks. Waiting for my turn to testify, surrounded by federal marshals who barely spoke to me. I'd already been relocated once, moved to a safe house in New Jersey under a fake name, but I'd have to testify under my real name, my real face, in front of Vincent and everyone else. I tried not to think about it. Tried not to think about what I'd say when I saw him. Tried not to imagine the look in his eyes when I walked into that courtroom and sat in the witness box and told the jury everything I knew, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. When my day came, they brought me in through a side entrance, surrounded by marshals. The courtroom was packed. Reporters. Spectators. Family members of the defendants. And Vincent. He sat at the defense table in a suit I'd picked out for him 2 years ago, his face unreadable, his eyes locked on me the second I walked in. I sat in the witness box. Took the oath. Tried to keep my hands from shaking. The prosecutor, a woman named Ellen Kozlowski, stood up and smiled at me like we were friends. Mrs. Terranova, she said, can you please tell the jury how you know the defendant, Vincent Terranova? He's my husband. And how long have you been married? 5 years. During those 5 years, did you become aware of your husband's involvement with organized crime? I looked at Vincent. He was staring at me with no expression at all. Just watching. Waiting. Yes, I said, can you describe what you became aware of? So I did. I told them everything. The meetings at our condo. The cash in paper bags. The phone calls. The conversations I'd overheard about extortion, about money laundering, about violence. I told them about the night Vincent came home with blood on his shirt. About the pager message that said T talked. About Thomas Greco's murder on the news the next morning, I told them about the way the mafia worked. The hierarchy. The rules. The fear that kept everyone in line, and I told them about the code. Omerta. The silence that was supposed to be sacred, the silence I was breaking. Vincent's lawyer cross-examined me for 6 hours. Tried to make me look like a liar, a gold digger, a woman scorned. Tried to suggest I was making things up to save myself, but I wasn't making anything up. And the jury knew it. When I finally stepped down from the witness box, I couldn't look at Vincent. I just walked out of the courtroom and let the marshals take me away. I never saw him again. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Found all 19 defendants guilty on multiple counts. Vincent was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. His father, Dominic, got 30 years. He died of a heart attack 6 months into his sentence. Tommy Marchetti got 20 years. He was stabbed to death in the yard at Lewisburg Penitentiary in 1993. No one was ever charged. I went into witness protection in November of 1991. They gave me a new name, a new social security number, a new life in a place I can't tell you about. They gave me money to start over. A job. An apartment. A handbook on how to disappear. What they didn't give me was peace. I spent the first year looking over my shoulder, jumping at every car that slowed down, every stranger who looked at me too long. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't trust anyone. The mafia has a long memory. And I'd broken the one rule that mattered. I thought about Vincent every day. Wondered if he hated me. Wondered if he understood why I did it. Wondered if he would have done the same thing if our positions were reversed. I got my answer in 1994. A letter arrived at my lawyer's office, forwarded through a series of channels to protect my location. It was from Vincent. Short. Handwritten. No return address. It said, "You did what you had to do. I would have done the same. But that doesn't mean I forgive you." Live with that, I burned the letter. Cried for 3 days. Moved to another city. I'm 58 years old now. I've been in witness protection for 30 years. I've had other names, other lives, other chances to start over, but I never remarried. Never had children. Never let anyone get close enough to know who I really was. Because once you've lived in the mafia's world, you never really leave it. It stays with you. In your bones. In your dreams. In the way you flinch when someone raises their voice or the way you check the locks 3 times before you go to bed. People ask me sometimes, when they find out little pieces of my story, why I stayed with Vincent as long as I did. Why I didn't leave sooner. Why I let myself get pulled into that life, and the truth is, I don't have a good answer. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the seduction of luxury, of feeling important, of being connected to power, or maybe it was something simpler. Maybe I wanted to believe that Vincent was more than what he did. That the man who held me at night was different from the man who ordered people killed, but he wasn't different. He was both. And I loved him anyway. The mafia isn't what people think it is. It's not The Godfather or Goodfellas or some romantic myth about honor among thieves. It's a machine. A system built on fear and violence and the willingness to destroy anyone who threatens it. It chews people up and spits them out. It takes everything you have and gives you nothing but blood on your hands and nightmares you can't escape, and the worst part is, it makes you complicit. It makes you part of the machine. Until one day you wake up and realize you're just as guilty as the men pulling the triggers. I think about the restaurant owner's daughter sometimes. Wonder if she's okay. Wonder if her father paid what he owed or if something terrible happened to them because of men like Vincent. I think about Thomas Greco. About his family. About the hole his death left behind. I think about all the people who got hurt so that I could wear a mink coat and drive a Mercedes and live in a condo with a view, and I think about Vincent. Sitting in a prison cell somewhere, 63 years old now, still refusing to break omerta even though it cost him everything. I betrayed him. I testified. I became the thing the mafia hates most, but I'm alive. And he's not. Not really. He's a ghost. Locked in a cage, waiting to die. Was it worth it? Was betraying him worth my freedom? I don't know. I've spent 30 years trying to answer that question, and I still don't know. All I know is that the mafia takes everything. Your money. Your freedom. Your soul. And once it has you, it never lets go. Vincent used to say that in this life, you only have two things you can't afford to lose: your honor and your silence. I lost both, and I've been paying for it ever since. The night I heard my husband's voice on that FBI recording, I knew the famiglia would not let him live. What I didn't know was that I'd be the one who killed him. Not with a gun or a knife, but with my words. With the truth. They say the truth sets you free. They're wrong. The truth just gives you a different kind of prison. One with no bars. No walls. No guards, just you and your memories and the ghosts of everyone you loved and betrayed. That's the real mafia. Not the men in suits making threats. Not the violence or the money or the power, it's the way it gets inside you. The way it makes you choose between survival and loyalty. The way it destroys everything you touch, and the worst part is, even now, even after everything, there's a part of me that misses it. Misses Vincent. Misses the life we had, as broken and bloody as it was, because it was real. And this life I have now. This witness protection fairy tale feels like a lie I'm living to avoid facing the truth. I was Angela Terranova. I was a mafia wife. I lived in a world most people only see in movies, and I survived it, but survival isn't the same as living, it's just waiting to die.